Thank you, Jim. Good afternoon, colleagues. I hope you're enjoying the day so far. And welcome to this session on decolonizing the medical curriculum. I think what we hope from this session is to spark a conversation really about decolonization and to perhaps go beyond the buzzword to bring about the actual change by talking about the imperatives around decolonizing the medical curriculum, by sharing the experiences that we have got at BSMS and how successful co-creating the decolonized medical curriculum was for us at BSMS. I'll introduce myself first. I'm Wajeeha. I'm lecturer in postgraduate medicine at BSMS. I'm also postgraduate lead for diabetes in primary care and EDI lead for that. My co-presenter is Muna Al-Jawad. Muna, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hello, yes, I'm Muna Al-Jawad. I am lead for curriculum development in the undergraduate curriculum at BSMS, and I'm a geriatrician at the County Hospital in Brighton.
Thank you, Muna. So let's talk about decolonization. I think the term decolonization was coined in the wake of Windrush scandal and Road Must Fall campaign. And for me, it actually portrays a very simple concept of racial equality, really, but it has complex practicalities involved and complex institutional realities involved in implementation of this, especially in medical education. I have taken this figure from a charity which work on trying to decolonize it, but I think this figure also sort of, for me, portrays how the structural racism actually portrays itself. And I think most importantly, the power dynamics and the imbalance. And it shows actually the fight and the struggle for racial equality actually is still in the hands of the very group who did experience that injustice and inequality. So I think this is a very important message to convey, that it is still largely in the hands of the people who experience it. So when we talk about decolonizing medical curriculum, what are the imperatives of that? For me, it is about revisiting the history of medicine, and by which I mean to talk about the role and the contributions, knowingly and unknowingly, of the colonized people in the modern medicine to be. So for example, when we talk about James Marion Sen as a father of gynecology, I think it is imperative to talk about the unethical approaches that he used on the slaves, black slaves, in developing the SIM speculum and all the procedures, for the repair of fistula. And that similarly goes for the syphilis experiments or how the HeLa cells came to be. The next thing I think about is also revisiting the pedagogy in medical education, which has been for a long period of time very male, white, Eurocentric worldview of medicine, and to try to shift that narrative towards more engaged pedagogy by having educational materials and the content that represent all. So for example, a very classical example is of dermatology, where we are aware of that the signs can represent in different skin colors differently. So to include that in our medical curriculum and to talk about diversifying the clinical studies is a real imperative of changing the pedagogy in medical education. The next thing for me is to actually revisit medical research by thinking about how unconscious bias in collecting the samples from the marginalized group has been and how it has been compensated because of inadequate sampling, or just now talking about the impact of the conflation of race and culture in the medical research, and also how the race as a contributing factor towards different disease progression has been. And it's important that this has to be included in the medical research from there onwards. It is also to make our medical students aware of the health inequalities and disparities in our healthcare system. I think both from the point of view of those who provide the healthcare, so the disparities there, and who are at the receiving end as a patient. And I think it's also imperative to make our students aware that the vision of NHS as a global healthcare system, which is free for all, that the notion will be challenged where they are going to work in that structure. And I think this is very much highlighted in the NHS report called Snowy White Peaks in the NHS. And I would really recommend you for a good read for that. So I think I had tried to look at the different dimensions, and I think that it is a necessary imperative to bring change to decolonize the medical curriculum as it stands today. I would hand over for more creative and immersive experience to Muna about how her experience has been in decolonizing the undergraduate curriculum. So over to you, Muna.
Thanks, Wajeeha. Yeah, so I'm just going to talk about, I'm going to kind of got two types of slide. One type of slide is this type of thing where I tell you what we're doing. And then I've got some comics to show you as well, which are part of a research project I'm doing, a collaborative autoethnographic research project that I'm doing around this work. So me and Gorish Chawla, who I think is on this call, and Neil Singh, who I don't think is on this call, are doing this research together. So these are kind of my contribution to that research. It's not finished yet, it's all in progress. But anyway, what we're doing at Brighton in terms of the undergraduate course is that we've got a scheme called Inclusive Practice Partners. This is funded by the University of Brighton via the Centre for Teaching and Learning. And I've got 6 students this year basically paid for 2 hours a week to work with me and other faculty on decolonizing. We have them for about 6 months of the year. Last year, we sort of didn't quite know which bits to do. So we just sort of looked at everything. So I just said to the students, whatever I had students from 4 of the years, and I said, whatever you're kind of experiencing, just look at it through a decolonizing lens, challenge content, look at how it's being taught. And we ended up with this kind of big spreadsheet of ideas, things which were kind of separated by lecture, but, you know, very detailed kind of stuff where the student said, you know, please could you put more skin of color in this particular talk, because all of your slides only showed white skin, for example. So we sent those suggestions out we told all the teachers it was happening, and we sent suggestions out to teachers, module leads and phase leads, and we hope that some changes have been made. We're sort of looking at that this year, what changes have been made. Then this year, we were asked by University of Brighton, and I think it was a good idea to focus on a few specific areas, and we chose these 4 partly because they chose us. So people came to us and said, for example, the anatomy team came to us and said, we really want to do some stuff around decolonizing, can we work with you? And so we said, yes, brilliant. And other areas where we kind of knew there was something that needed doing. So 203, which is reproduction endocrine, have a very keen module lead who is very excited about this and was aware that there was a lot of work that she needs to do within her module. So we're working with her. We're doing some work with 304 surgery, mainly around pedagogy. So how they teach, because there's been complaints, I guess, from students around how they're taught in surgical context. So we're kind of looking at that as part of this work. And we're focusing on dermatology just because it's such an obvious thing. You know, if you can't get your skin color stuff right, then what are you kind of doing with your decolonizing work? So that's what we're doing this year. And then we've also got some pan-curricular work. So CDG is our curriculum development group. So we have a standing item around decolonizing and what's going on. And CMB is our curriculum management board, where we talk about these processes. And we've also put other stuff in place that's kind of a bit outside of the curriculum, like reporting processes and things like that. And then I run a module called Personal and Professional Development, and that has very much been developed thinking about inclusivity type issues. So here's the first comic, I think, our reflections on early research. So that's me, I'm Old Person Whisperer, that's my superhero alter ego, because I'm a geriatrician. Neil, I've called Neil the protest singer, and Gorish, who's here, is the troublemaker. So the first comic's about educating ourselves and waking up. It's called Stages of Wokeness, also known as GCS, and me acknowledging that woke is a loaded term, and it stars me as the doctor, Neil as the patient, and Gorish as the well-read underminer of my credibility. I'm so glad he's here today. Decolonizing the curriculum means waking up to the forces that shape it. So here's the definitive guide, what our students should learn. And we know that it's informed by colonialism, ableism, class structures, the patriarchy, insert your favorite hegemony here, white supremacy, already doing white fragility, This feels like the end of the comic, Wajeeha. Anyway, okay, surely there isn't one man. Oh yeah, there we go. In clinical practice, we use the Glasgow Coma scale to measure conscious levels. So GCS3, the clinicians here will know, is completely comatose, and GCS15 is A-OK. Okay, Neil, let's see what it might look like reimagined as gradually conscious states. Oh, here we go, all performance, no action. GCS 3 to 6. So this is Neil in a coma, he's the patient. Our curriculum is fine, we treat everyone the same. And I'm saying, see what I mean, comatose. GCS 7 to 9, he's slightly more awake now, I'm saying. Although I have noticed some gaps, says Neil, like, what does this rash look like on darker skin? It's all a bit white, the curriculum. GCS 10 to 12, I mean, maybe I should find out why we teach what we teach. So he can actually hear what people say now at this GCS. And then GCS 13 to 14, I just keep noticing systemic oppression everywhere. Oh my God, maybe I'm part of the problem, he's thinking. Now he's alert, but a bit confused. Sorry, it's a bit uncomfortable, says me, the doctor. GCS 15, so Neil is actually a singer in real life, so he always sings all his lines, he sings lots of his lines. Anyway, he sings, I realize I'll never understand all perspectives, particularly those of the most marginalized, but I will stay awake and keep learning. This is draft number 424 of the curriculum. He's fully awake, I say. And Gorish says, the thing is, can you ever be fully awake? And what are you going to do about it? So what this means from a curriculum perspective is that it has to be looked at from multiple perspectives in order to constantly change and develop. So you need to think about things like, what's the history from your perspective, who's excluded and why, what about class, why so white, do you think this is sexist, don't forget queer people, travellers are an interesting group, etc., etc., etc. And when you're thinking about who to focus on, because there feels like so much, Gorish tells us to remember Gandhi's talisman, recall the face of the poorest and the weakest man, and ask yourself if the step you contemplate is going to be of any use to him. That's the comic. What we're doing in practice, some of the things the inclusive practice partners have been doing and we've been doing in the school are, we had an anti-racist forum that started after the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020 after the killing of George Floyd, and that's now converted itself into an inclusivity forum, so it covers stuff broader than just race. We have a student version and a staff version that are both still going. We have training for our inclusive practice partners and the involved faculty on partnership working that's run by the University of Brighton, and it includes lots of stuff around co-production, partnership working, which is like really how all this works. We have also had from University of Brighton and other sources education around decolonising colonial history and the impact on current medical teaching and practice. We have written some guidance on inclusive language for teachers, which we're happy to share if anyone wants it. There is training for staff offered by both universities in this area. There is NHS training for clinical teachers around inclusivity. And we're just trying to integrate this really into teaching across all phases of the undergraduate course. That is our plan. Okay, so the content has been okay and people are sort of responsive. The pedagogy's been a bit more tricky. So I think I'm showing a comic about that now. Oh yeah. So this is tabula rasa, which is another way of saying blank slates. And this is me speaking. John Locke came up with the idea that the human mind at birth was a blank slate, or tabula rasa. Then Gorish says, we agreed no quoting white men, remember. Oh yeah, this is because in our research we've agreed that we're not going to quote the usual canon of white men, we're going to quote marginalized scholars. Anyway, Locke was influenced in this by Ibn Tufayl, a 12th century Arab Muslim scholar. Oops, sorry, I say. Then it's me. Okay, well, despite them both being wrong, this idea seems to have stuck in how we teach medicine. Yes, putting them in the Ibn bin. In writing and delivering the curriculum, we think we know our students. But, so this is saying teach them this, this, and that, no points for experience of students. So we think we know our students, but they're blank faces in the lecture theatre or no faces on Teams or Zoom. They are numbers on a mark sheet, OSCE Examiner 7, student number 65. They are figures on a spreadsheet when you're looking at funding. This might not seem so bad until we scrutinize what we really mean by blank slate in the context of medical students. This is the decolonizing bit, because assumptions are never blank or unbiased. So the traditional medical student is an 18-year-old, healthy, white, middle-class man. Of course, most medical students are not of that tradition. So if we see our students as people, our curriculum has to change. The learning objectives are not the most important thing in the curriculum. Is this heresy, she says, as the lead for curriculum development. And then this is Bell Hooks speaking. To begin, the professor must genuinely value everyone's presence, recognition that everyone contributes. So in curriculum, you need to, number one, make opportunities for learners to speak. Number two, listen. And then number three, negotiate how to work together. And then someone's thinking, probably, gosh, she's such a troublemaker, but how is there time for this with all the learning objectives to deliver? Or more Bell Hooks, I quote her a lot, to teach in a manner that respects and cares for the souls of our students is essential if we're to provide the necessary conditions where learning can most deeply and intimately begin. Oh, so how do you do this in practice, blimey? So we are running, so we have a BSMS teachers course called the Time course that I run. So I do a lot of this type of stuff there, a lot of thinking about ourselves as teachers and how we include our students. Part of this, the work on differential attainment that's going on at BSMS and is expanding now into postgraduate as well, will help with this, because that sort of forces you to work out who's not attaining and why, and then you have to see them as a person. I think there's something really interesting about how we respond to complaints. So when our students complain quite a lot, and I think particularly, I think there's a big change in that, isn't there, a gradual change in that. And then I think a really big change came with Black Lives Matter, with that protest, where suddenly they were really complaining a lot about stuff. And I think I see complaint as diversity work. I see complaint as informing what we do rather than as troublemakers making trouble. And I think that comes from Sarah Ahmed, who's also known as Feminist Killjoy. So a recent example for us is that we have quite a lot of complaints about us not giving trigger warnings. So if I teach on something, then sometimes students will come back to us and say, I can't believe you taught on that thing without telling us you're going to teach on that thing, because I've had experience of that thing, you know, breast cancer, whatever the thing is, dementia, whatever the thing is, how could you not put a trigger warning in? So we've done a lot of thinking as a team about how we do trigger warnings, and we've just written a whole policy around it, which again, I can share with people if you want to see it. But so what I'm trying to say is you use the complaint from the student as a way of thinking about your practice and changing, rather than as, oh, the students are complaining again. And then the work around reporting mechanisms kind of feeds into this. So rather than using your reporting mechanisms just to kind of tell the person off who's done the bad thing, you also use the anonymous reporting as well to look at where's stuff happening, how can we support students better, and how can we support teachers better so this stuff doesn't happen. Okay, I think I saw something flash up in the chat where someone said, how do people respond to your decolonizing work? So now I'm going to tell you. So this is about the worrying work of decolonizing the curriculum. After the students reviewed the curriculum, we sent some emails. Dear colleague, we're decolonizing. Please think about what you said in that lecture. Thanks. Of course, we included more detail, resources, and were nicer. Most of the replies were positive and lovely, but some were a bit worrying. Maybe these worry dolls will help us. So worry dolls, if you don't know, are appropriated / bought from Guatemala, and you often give them to children. You tell them your worries, and then you sleep on it, and in the morning you have your answer. So these are me talking to my worry dolls. Worrying reply number one, people took offense. Offense taken. Are you saying I'm racist? How dare you? That's it, I resign. This is me thinking, oh no, I've upset them, but we are right, and maybe they're being a bit defensive. Shall I rage against or apologize? And so this worry doll is the Loretta Ross worry doll. I would point you to her as someone, as a really good speaker. She's on YouTube a lot, who talks about calling people in, not calling people out. So she's all about being kind. And when someone says something that you want to call out and say, wait a minute, that's racist or whatever, you say, I love you, tell me more. Obviously, you might not say those words exactly, but you say something that means that. And she talks about using the joy that connects us, so trying to call people in. Worrying reply number 2. So this is about diversify versus decolonize. I had some replies like this. I agree, showing skin of color is important. Diversity is important. Don't like the term decolonizing though. So this is Neil thinking, just changing skin color on 1 or 2 slides is tokenistic. It makes me feel like white skin is normal and brown skin is different. So we did see this, just as an aside, in some of one of our dermatology lectures did their normal lecture of all the white skin that they do, and then at the end put a link to kind of Mind the Gap and some other resources, and said, you know, if you want to look at different colors of skin, here's a place. And obviously that's not a very helpful thing to do. I guess we'll agree to disagree, says Neil. And this is Nihan Al-Bayrak, who's my other worry doll, who writes, what's presented as diverse would usually be seen as not the ordinary. Diversity reinforces the existing unjust system. Decolonization challenges it. Diversifying without acknowledging unequal power relations cannot bring equality. So we do want more black skin on the slides, but we don't just want more black skin on the slides. Worrying reply number 3, too political. I get what you're saying. I'm just concerned it's too political. Doctors are supposed to be apolitical. This is Gorish saying teaching is always a political act, whether the teacher acknowledges this or not. Teaching medical knowledge is what Edward Said would call pretended supra-political activity. So you're sort of, yeah. Edward Said Worriedall says the liberal consensus that true knowledge is fundamentally non-political obscures the highly organized political circumstances when knowledge is produced. So here are all the worry dolls together saying, what do you expect though? You're criticizing teachers who've worked hard and tried to be inclusive. And I guess we say back, we know it's happened to us. That it is normal to be defensive, but perhaps it's not helpful. So if someone less powerful than you, for example, a student, queries your teaching, we expect you to say, while you're thinking, what? I'm not a racist or imperialist or sexist. We expect you to say, thanks for telling me that. I'll think about it, and then actually think about it. And then think to yourself, I hope what I'm teaching is okay, and maybe change things a bit, which might be weeks later after you've settled down and got less defensive. How we do this in practice is ongoing conversations. So you just have to keep talking to people. When they come back to you with the defense stuff, you just go back with kindness and try and have a conversation. You know, the students might not be right. Who knows who's right? You work on partnerships and collaboration. And there's a big thing about recognition for this work. So getting the students paid is really important, but also recognizing who's doing the work among faculty and departments in this area. I think there's something about cultivating friendship and affinity. I do have a comic about that, but no time to show it today. That comes from Broderick Chow's work. I think it should be part of the curriculum development agenda. So I've written some new curriculum development guidelines, which have inclusivity kind of at every stage. And then at BSMS, we have a new Equality, Diversity and Staff Development Committee, which plugs in the kind of EDI agenda with staff development, which is actually clever, I think, and is going to work really well.
Thank you, Mona. Thank you very much. I loved your worry dolls. I really want to bring them to my teaching sessions. I think you have very eloquently explained all the aspects of actually decolonizing the medical curriculum. And I think there's also similar collaborative effort going on in the postgraduate side. And we do have inclusive partner scheme going on in the public health at the moment, where the 2 students are working full-time. They're full-time students who are working once a week on that. I think from my perspective, I just took a different twist to that, is that under postgraduate courses, we have part-time students, and these students are actually expert in their subject-specific discipline, and they have diverse clinical and professional backgrounds. And I thought this is a very resourceful element that we have got. And for me, actually, all of my students in the diabetes course act as an inclusive partner. And that helped me in realizing my dream of having really an inclusive community of practice. That's where we can have an engaged pedagogy. So what we did is actually, we didn't have a monetary incentive really, but what we asked and encouraged our students and said that you are experts from your fields and you have knowledge. So please bring in that knowledge. Please bring your clinical presentations from your practice in managing diabetes, which represents the diverse cases really, and to help us co-create the curriculum with us in the postgraduate diabetes. And also to keep a reflective log in reviewing the teaching delivery from our staff really, and bring those recommendations to the table. So we had regular meetings with our teaching team and the students, and sometimes the student representatives really, to go through the curriculum really. And that, I think, as I try to consolidate in this figure, is to co-create concept, content, and to try to develop that inclusive community to refer to the engaged pedagogy. In terms of the staff, I think that you have heard from Muna that we have EDSD, Equality, Diversity and Staff Development Committee. And I think, again, mentioning back to Muna's workfulness state, that we constantly have updates, and we have several guides actually sent to our teaching teams, and also to send them questionnaires to actually benchmark how their teaching involves inclusive practices really, and to keep them in that wakeful state by asking them how they can reconnect, reorder, and reclaim the knowledge. So it's to make sure that it's not about deleting knowledge, but it's actually reordering and reclaiming the knowledge that has been hidden and marginalized for a long period of time. So I hope we were able to share our experiences with you, and we have some resources from BSMS, from Brighton, and some further reading. We have Snowy White Peaks report here. And thank you so much for listening to us. And I think we are open to any questions now, so feel free to ask.